All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Industrial Insights Podcast. I have Neal Perry of Industry Coatings with me today, and we're talking about painting buildings and best practices, costs, and timing considerations. And everyone who has a building runs through this and has a issue at some point in time. So I figured it's great to cross that bridge a little bit and just help make sure we're doing the best that we can. So Neal, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you and spending time with me on this.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So the IE, you do a fair amount out there. Yeah. How many would you
We
say you painted if you were just
we
guessing?
definitely do. I don't know. I couldn't really take a guess. Millions of square feet. Um,
Yeah.
just a little background on myself. I've been in the industry since 2000, and I started industry coatings in 2008. So we've been around a little bit. Mostly what we do is, I would say, medium to large industrial commercial warehousing. Like I said, millions of square feet over the years. I've never counted. It would be interesting to try and figure that out, but millions. We do a fair amount of buildings.
You only count when it's slow. So when it's not slow, you just,
Yeah,
yeah, slow and go
that's
and don't
true.
worry
Yes.
about it.
Yeah.
Who got you into the game or what made you think this was going to be a good place to be?
Oh, that's a long story. You don't have time on the podcast for that, but basically, my family's been in the industry for quite some time. My grandfather started in the industry. My dad took that company over. My family still kind of works together. We've separated out a little bit, so we all have our own different companies. And I would say I tried to avoid the industry as long as possible, just because of it being
We
with
sucked you
family.
in.
But
Yeah.
eventually I got sucked in there, and I do love aspects of it. I love the project managing and bidding the projects and stuff like that, and really like problem solving, because you would think it's all the same. It's paint. Every job is identical. It is definitely not. Even though you see these big box tilt ups going up, you think, well, that's just repetitive. It's really not. Things are constantly changing in the industry, materials, and I think that's for everybody too, not just the painting industry. I'm sure you've seen some things change over time. So you're constantly problem solving, and just trying to help the generals out and the owners out and the tenants out. And so that's kind of where I landed, and it's been good for me. I like it.
Yeah, give me an example of a project you were on that speaks to some of the new materials and just problem solving.
Yeah, so really the paints have changed a lot since I started, and that's really from California mandating things, AQMD, and so the manufacturers are constantly having to, I would say, reformulate the paints, and then really the guys in the field are having to almost relearn how to apply those paints so they look good. They're constantly changing. So once you think you have it down and they look really good, they don't. Things change, as especially during COVID. I feel like there was a lot of, I would say, manufacturer problems, them getting raw materials and things like that. So that threw a wrench in things for sure. So I feel like we're just now coming out of that, where we're getting things back to where they were. Paints are looking fairly good. Raw materials are coming in, so that helps a lot. But yeah, that's one of the things that I think everyone had a problem with and has to learn. I know, like when we're painting walls inside of a building, like gypsum board walls, those guys are being mandated to use a lot of recycled materials. So the
I was
paper
going
is
to ask
not.
you, ESG, green, environmentally friendly means there's a different brand of that for based on who's telling you need to do it. But I feel like increasingly you got institutional owners that have some kind of mandate or way they're trying to improve and be mindful. And then
Yes.
it comes down to construction. And so, yeah, I see that a lot in the contracts themselves, and then see companies that want to or don't want to abide by them or play ball with them or have a problem with it's going to cost me more, then am I still going to do it? So yeah, you must be on the forefront of some of that.
Yeah, we see a lot of like lead projects, and they're looking for that. So luckily for me, most of the materials that we use now are, by California mandate, zero VOC. So it's not really that hard to meet the lead on my end. They just need the paperwork from us is all. So that's kind of fairly easy for me to reach.
Super. Okay. And how do things change when you're going up the scale of size of building, like a million square foot or over a 200,000 foot, or other than just like people?
Yeah. The scheduling, where if you're doing a new construction building, we're jumping around a lot. Typically, we'll start working on one side as opposed to the building as a whole. They'll tilt panels on one side, and we'll start on that side first, and then move to the other side. We're doing it in phases, really. A lot of these guys, I feel like, have tenants already, so they're trying to close out portions of the building. So again, scheduling, but that's a lot on really who's coming into the building, what their timeline is, and the general contractor dictates that a lot. Where we're repainting the buildings, that just depends a lot on us schedule wise and what the tenant's available for us to work on. We have done some, let's say, some occupied Amazon work, which is very difficult. I'm sure you know that. We're
Yeah.
jumping around a lot where we're doing maybe 4 truck bays at a time, wash, patch, paint, and then moving on, so that it's much more difficult and time consuming.
Yeah. Occupied buildings, I can only imagine the million different considerations inside
Yes.
and out.
Yes.
Cool. I figured there's a couple different ways we could go. There's new buildings, and then there's repainting old buildings, and then there's kind of like preventative maintenance and making them
Sure.
last longer. So let's start with new ones. Any
Yeah.
other like you get involved from the very beginning and go through like estimating and project management? What can you walk me through like a typical project for a new build?
Yeah, sure. So typically I'll see it as a bid invite,
And I love that what people get right, wrong, or like anything that stands out of like normal tripping hazards. If you point them out, that's always great.
Yeah, not too much on the bidding side. I like to say the plans are the plans. So if someone makes a mistake, it really, I don't know who that really falls back to. Most of the time, probably the architect or something missing. But on my end, I don't see a lot of huge mistakes or misses. So basically, I see it as a bid invite. We'll provide a number to a general, or 2 or 3 or 4 will be bidding the same project. We'll be awarded the project, and then we'll really start in on initially the submittal process. So we'll give them drawdowns, and that'll go back and get spread around to the general, the owners, the architect for approval. Once we get those approved, we'll get out on site and do what we call a mock-up. So we'll put the actual material on the building so everyone can see it and agree on it. And then, yeah, the general is mostly responsible for scheduling. So, again, I'll probably see, I'm the late end of the project, so, I'll come out and we'll start washing, prepping, priming, on the project. And usually that takes anywhere from if we're doing a million square footers, it's probably 3 to 6 month process, depending on what they want to do out there.
Yeah, and a million square feet takes you to a lot of different places. So you could be in Hesperia or Victorville or
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
So
not just
we
Ontario
do,
anymore, like a Barron.
I would say we do work from San Diego all the way up to Northern California. So we do span a wide area. Mostly, yes, in I would say San Bernardino County seems like they're building a bunch there. We're in Paris a lot. LA not so much, but there are some things popping up in LA as far as new construction. That area is kind of built out. But yes, Hesperia seems to be a new location where things are popping up, especially what I would call the big boys. These are million plus square foot buildings that are popping up out there.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to mock-ups and renderings, I love how you have like a program that can help you see what it's going to look like beforehand,
Yeah.
before like you get to the mock-up stage. How often do you find changes there? It seems like there's only a very small amount that are doing like jobs that are like design heavy. It seems like most of the time it comes back down to like who designed the tilt walls and
Yeah. Yeah.
what kind of features did they build into them.
We don't see a lot of changes in color. These guys pretty much have them down pat. They follow, they have their own spec, and so that usually doesn't create a lot of changes for myself. They've already hashed that out. So unless somebody really doesn't like something, an owner, we don't really see a lot of changes in it. We'll do a mock-up and it usually gets approved pretty fast.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like the design is getting better and better with some of these buildings. But then you also find there's a huge difference between people that spent a lot of time and effort on the design and ones that are kind of like stamping them out. There's quite a variety of like a level of finish that goes into them.
Well, for sure. And you can get a wide variety of specs too, depending on who is the developer of the building. I would say the majority of people will list a color, but they don't exactly list a material that they want. So you have, I would say the majority of people are not listing the material, just a color. But then you have people like, let's say, Rexford, which know exactly what they want. So you're really sticking to a hard spec there where they're using, top end materials and very dark colors typically, on these new buildings, which also can create a problem in itself on the design aspect.
Yeah. Tell me more about that, how the different materials change what the final product is. And then I'd love to get into a little bit of like the darker, and it got so popular and so hot for a period of time. And then there are aspects to it that I feel like design wise are great, but like owners sometimes complain that it doesn't last as long or doesn't look as good for as long.
Yeah, it for sure doesn't. So one of the things that not a lot of people know is the colors like blue, reds, and yellows. Those colors, especially when they're made in a clear base. So the paint comes as clear, and they shoot the tint into the paint. So what happens is over time that fades really fast because the only thing that's producing the color is the tint that's in the paint. So that fades out really fast. Blacks, not so much because they come as a base already as a black. So most of the paint will come in a light, medium, and dark base that's tintable. So the object is to just put a little bit of color in it, and that's going to get you longevity out of it. So when you're going with these colors that are really bright blues, reds, especially yellows, those colors just don't last. I mean, I typically see them, a year, and they're not looking great.
So what would you do if it was yours? What would you pick, knowing what you know?
Well, black and red, because because that's the company colors.
What's your
Uh,
colors?
yeah, for sure. But you can
I
do
just
things
choose
like
red in your
use.
company colors, Neil. That's creating a huge problem.
Yes. You can do things like use higher end materials, which will last longer. You can do things like find a red based material, so you're not shooting just a bunch of colorant into it, and they will last you longer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember black getting so hot on like these creative conversions where you're turning like industrial buildings into office buildings and exposed
Yeah.
ceilings, and like I think like West LA, and like we're going
It
black on
seems like we're
everything.
putting up a lot of black right now, and I mean, and heavy black too. I mean, a lot of the building being black. It used to be just bands, and now it's like literally the whole building, which is kind of crazy. I guess we'll find out if that ends up heating up the building. There's a whole other aspect of the building
Yeah,
heating and cooling. So
absorbing the
when,
heat.
especially too in Southern California, what happens is these buildings, they can get wet, and so when the sun comes out, they heat up quickly, and that produces cracks in the building. So we'll see how well that holds out in time to come, I guess, because we just started putting up a lot of black recently.
How's the seasons change your how you work your projects?
Not a
I'm
whole
like,
lot. Not a whole
okay,
lot. It's Southern California. We're not getting, we're not getting a lot of rain. Um, it doesn't, I would say it really doesn't affect us a whole bunch. What happens is we'll just turn to interior work if we get a couple of days of rain, and typically it's light rain. So, and if we're repainting a building, we'll hold off for a couple of days to kind of let it dry out. So it doesn't affect us a whole bunch.
that's awesome. You would think maybe if we're in Phoenix or if we're in Minnesota, you'd have a different answer.
Oh, I think those guys have a whole different ball game. Yes, areas where they're getting rain and snow, and I think those guys specifically might stack work that's interior only for those periods of time. But for us in Southern California, we really don't do that. We'll paint anything at any time, really.
Yeah. Super. Anything else for new builds that are like common misunderstandings or commonly misunderstood, perhaps, or like otherwise, like what's the general like? You gave me a little bit of time frame. What are like a budget numbers that are like rules of thumbs in
Oh,
the
that's
budget
really
world?
hard. I thought you might ask me that. Yeah. So you know what? I don't really have a budget rule of thumb number as far as square footage. And I think what people like to do, maybe owners, they'll take a floor square footage but really that means nothing to me because the building can be a lot taller, a lot shorter. There can be a ton of metal canopies, no metal canopies. People are turning to like a Luca bond, so that's not painted. They have a lot more pre-finished surfaces, it seems like. So
What's a
those
Luca
numbers
bond?
can. Yeah, it's like a powder coating pre-finished surface that they're using for canopies and stuff like that. So it's really the numbers can be all over the map. I feel like there is no budgetary number that would, really get you to where you needed to be.
Yeah, no worries. I love asking. You got to ask people those questions.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. If I had one, I'd give it to you.
Yeah. When we turn to like repaints, right?
Hmm.
Like I gotta imagine that's a whole other ball of wax of like you got
Yes.
someone else's job, time has done its steal on the building, and you have
Yeah.
like issues. And
Yes.
maybe not always, but so how do you look at those things, or like what are the most common problems that you come across?
I mean, first off, we got to evaluate the building and, so we'll go out, we'll take a look at the building and see what's happening to it. Does it have cracks in it? Is it chalking? Is it peeling? Um, we have fixed a fair amount of work where just like anything, I would guess you get what you pay for, so we're, uh, some owners have taken taken some cheaper bids and it's not lasting even a year and it's peeling off the building. A lot of that has to do with the chalking, which is what we call efflorescence, which is like minerals that are in the concrete. So those start to seep out of the building. And if you really don't get that off or use a product to lock that in before you put a finish coat on, it's kind of you've done all that work for nothing. It's just going to start coming off. So we have fixed a couple of those. So the thing is, you really want to get out and evaluate what you're painting first. Make sure
My
that
first job, Neil, was for a painter, and he'd come up with a product to scrub efflorescence off that would
yeah,
like help remove it. And I was like, "Do you want to be a scrubber?" And you're like, "Oh my God, not really, but it's
yeah,
time to grow up and get a job." And so I got like, that was one of my first experiences of like, all right, what's this
yeah,
all about? And what's this problem? And how hard is it to remove? And it was ridiculously hard no matter what product you used. It was
yeah.
like not a fun job for
Some
sure.
of it
But
gets pretty heavy. Most of that you see in, I would say, block that's not painted, or aggregate, which we're not seeing a lot on buildings right now. Obviously, that was hot a long time ago, probably before our time. But but uh, but you really want to evaluate the building. You really want to do great prep work on a repaint, so your customers getting that longevity out of the material and it's not just sheeting off down the road.
the repaints I've done, we had the cracks that you have to like drill into them
Hmm.
to like clean them up, and then I did the backer rods and having to get into the joints and redo those. Those were two ones that like I was less familiar with. That was my own property with my own money, and it was like, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And why is it important? And
Yeah, so
why
so tell me
now?
about that. What were they doing with the backer rod and the drilling?
One was just like how to smooth out where there are cracks. And so to like take the crack and think of like a Dremel to like smooth it out until you reach like the end of the crack and then to fill it in. And
Yes.
then the other one was water intrusion at the joints. And then
Hmm.
figuring out like other than just like resealing it, like how do you better like set it up for success for being like for not getting moisture in there.
Yeah, right. So that's another thing that we'll evaluate on repaint buildings is the joints. And it's typical that I would say owners and tenants are not redoing joints for a very long time. I think if you look at the data sheets on them, it really says they're only good for, 5 to 7 years before you need to replace.
Okay.
I hardly see that. So as long as the joints have been painted over, primed and painted over, and if you touch them and they're kind of they have a little bounce to them, a little give, they're
Yeah.
still good. And in a situation like that, we would just repair anything that needed to be repaired, anything that's pulling away from the building itself. Or you can see daylight through. Obviously, not great. You're going to get water intrusion in there. So those we would come back and just and fill those back in, as opposed to tearing them out completely, replacing the backer rod and replacing the joint compound over the top.
Yeah. And then cracks, I'm sure you see all sorts of levels of severity.
All sorts of it from buildings that have, most of the new buildings will have some fine settling cracks. Um, that we can easily fix. We'll use something we call the lasso patch that we put over the top. It's basically like caulking in like a bucket form that they knife on to fill those cracks. All the way to right now we have a couple jobs going where they're literally chasing the crack, like you said, and epoxy injecting the crack. So it's a more severe crack where you're not really gonna paint's not gonna cover that crack, and it's too wide for the elasto patch to fix that. So we have someone come in, chase the joints, epoxy inject it, and then we'll come back over that and patch and smooth that out. It's a better system. It's costly to do that, to chase those cracks.
I
Um,
love the term chasing the cracks.
yeah,
Yeah, because you got
yeah.
to follow it where it goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to. But that's, I guess, a part of maintenance too, is if you keep up on the buildings and you're painting every 3 to 5 years, you're not really going to run into that situation where you have these cracks that are so wide that you have, to cut them out and epoxy inject them, so maintenance is important to keep up on so you're not getting that.
And painting roll-up doors. That
Yeah.
seems like that's problematic, old ones and painting them, or it's ain't no thing.
It ain't no thing, but I always advise against it, especially if they're not painted on a building. So roll-up doors, they come pre-finished powder coated. That coating is just superior to something we're going to be able to put it out in the field. So if they're not painted, I like to leave them. You can wash them down really easily. Once you start painting them, then you got to think about it. You created a maintenance problem, so now you're having to repaint
Created a
them.
monster. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Especially on a building that's, a million, 2 million square feet, you're seeing hundreds of roll-up doors. So it's a lot of extra cost in the building to repaint those.
It's like painting the floor that people would do on smaller buildings where you're like, don't do it because once you do it,
Don't
yeah.
do it. Yeah, exactly. It's the same concept. You're going to have to continually keep up on that, which is going to be dollars.
Yeah. And you deal with graffiti sometimes. Is that,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get them on signs, of course, and then vacant buildings every once in a while.
yeah.
And what's it take there to turn it back into new again?
So there is a variety of products out that you
Other
can
than
use.
police and protection and,
Yeah, they don't seem to do a whole bunch. um,
yeah.
there's a variety of products you can use of anti-graffiti systems that you can put on, sacrificial, non-sacrificial, if you're really having a graffiti issue. It's
What's
nice.
sacrificial mean?
So the sacrificial graffiti coating would mean once you get graffitied, okay, the process to come out and clean it, that anti-graffiti coating would actually come off of the building with the graffiti. So it's basically sacrificing itself, right? And
Got
then
it.
you'd have to go reapply the coating again over the top. Um, the non-sacrificial is stays on the building, so that's more of something where you would come out, you would spray a solution on there, let it dissolve, and then you can wash or wipe it off the building. The problem is that I see is a lot of the anti-graffiti that's being, like, let's say, mandated by the cities right now. They're going, 8 to 10 foot high, or that first reveal. Well, if you've driven around and looked at some buildings, they're not really graffitiing that 8 to 10 foot high anymore. They seem to be doing something with fire hoses, it seems like, where they're all over the building and it's 20 to 30 foot tall on the building. So kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. You've if you've been to LA or certain cities, you've seen where just murals start taking over of like older buildings and older neighborhoods, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you. Yeah, I'm assuming you don't participate or you don't do those.
No, no. I have a couple buildings that we finished in Compton that recently that are having some graffiti problems. One of the solutions that somebody did come up with, though, is they had a local artist do an actual mural on the building, and it's kind of crazy. They stopped graffitiing that in the neighborhood, so I don't know if there's some sort of respect
Respect.
there or something, but yeah, but that does seem to work.
Yeah, and so we that's a few notes about new builds and repaints. How about preventative maintenance? That's probably something people miss out on all the time.
Yeah, I would say for preventative maintenance, there's not really something that you can do to prolong the life of the paint. So you just really on the building side, you should be painting. Some people paint every 3 to 5 years. You're gonna get the material is going to last longer than that. But once you really start seeing the paint break down and become chalky, you really want to paint over that. Or what's going to happen is the building is really going to take on a lot of water, especially concrete. It's porous. It's going to soak that water up. So, and then that's where you're going to start getting cracks because of the hot and cold. They're going to start working their way through the building. So as long as you keep up on the painting side of it, really you're shedding a lot of water off the building. It's not soaking so much up, and then you're going to lessen the chances of those cracks.
Pressure washing. Is
Yeah.
that's helpful? That's not. That's more
As
of
far as
just
a
like
maintenance side on
a
the
feeling.
building,
I'm sorry?
as far as like for maintenance on the building, pressure
Yeah.
washing.
Yeah. I know some places, like at least outside of Southern California, you do it if it's like more moisture where there's like lichen or like stuff that grows or stuff that like you want to like knock off the building or keep off from growing.
Yeah, for sure. If you're getting something on the building, pressure washing it off. I would say the pressure washing though can almost do more damage to the material that's on the building. So
Totally. I was
I,
thinking, yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't want to do it. You'll see a lot of lines on it. If we're just gonna wash a building, it's a lower PSI to get, let's say, the dirt off of it. You really don't want to blast the material that's on there because I think if anything, you're just gonna weaken what's there, and then you're gonna create basically lines on the building, and it's going to look like it's been pressure washed and getting ready to paint or prime over it. So I've never personally power washed a building for maintenance purposes.
Yeah. I also get that me talking about small buildings I own and you talking about 1 million square footers is probably also, that's probably a different, same, but different maybe when it comes to like cleaning and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Cool. And then painting the inside of the warehouse. I feel like we don't do that a lot of the time, but then some buildings they do.
yeah.
And that's purely aesthetic, or is there any other reason to do that? You think it works to
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
I know we're starting to insulate the inside of some buildings.
right.
Like, yeah, just thinking of temperature and climate
Yeah,
control.
I think a lot of people are doing it for aesthetics. You get good light reflectance value. I'm sure there has something to do with once you paint the building really light inside, you're using less light to light up the building. They have their skylights are coming through, so it's reflecting light off the walls. It's just a better environment to be in if you have workers in the warehouse. It looks nicer. And
I didn't
I
think
guess
about
in
the
this,
lighting. That's always a good one because we have more skylights. And I get that, like, if there's a ton of racking up to the ceiling, maybe it doesn't really like reflect so much, but it's not going to make
right.
it worse. That's for sure.
Yeah, right, right. And I guess, when owners are looking to lease out buildings, um, especially in a down economy, they want their building to look the best, so to be attractive to tenants. So I would assume that's why they're painting, columns above the yellow, typically to match the warehouse walls, painting the warehouse walls, getting that good light reflectance value. It probably looks bigger as well, so they're just really, really trying to be attractive to a tenant to come in.
Yeah. You're painting columns pink now, Neil? What was
No,
that all
that's a
about?
very old. I can't remember what job that was. That was the customer who wanted those pink, but yeah, this is fun to do instead of the standard yellow.
Yeah, I love when tenants have a particular like a brand that they're trying to
Yeah,
match. And sometimes it's all good, like if it matches, like more power to them. But I also get when they try and put it on the landlord and, hey, landlord, pay for it, and the landlord's not prepared to, or they had just painted it, or it's not time yet, and it's not like they're going to paint it like early for nothing. But yeah,
yeah. Speaking of the pink, we used to have a customer that had it was called Cabby, and they were like a designer, and we
yeah,
used to do a lot of pink on their buildings. I just remember that. I don't know why, but it's the pink.
yeah. And then you also get like a lot of people that are right before they sell, right? Like it's time to like jazz
Oh,
up the place.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then trying to convince them to use high quality materials even though they're on the verge of selling their property.
Yeah, yeah. big range of materials, and we can talk about that. I do think, painting the building, you're probably is the best best way to add value for your money, especially if you're going to turn around and sell a building. So really, when we go back to repaints, when we go repaint a building, maybe one that's for sale, I always like to know what's happening with the building. What's the end result? Are you selling the building? Are you holding it in your portfolio for a long time? Because really, that's going to dictate what they want to use on the building. We can use a commercial grade paint. We can do like one coat with the same colors that are there. You'll get your 5 to 10 years out of the material. It'll look great. You can turn around and sell the building. It looks fantastic. Whereas people that are really holding property for a really long time, and it's or their personal property, I really like to let them know about products that are going to last them a lot longer. Of course, they're more expensive, but I feel like people that are holding properties are willing to spend that money for the longevity of the material, So you always want to know I at least want to know what's the end result in the property. Are you keeping it? Are you selling it? Because that can really dictate cost.
What do you think's the real difference in performance based on those two options of like shorter term and one coat of the
But
same
so
color and longer term?
Yeah, so that's easy. That's the solids that are in the material. So that's the raw materials that go into making up the paint. That's what makes it better.
Yeah. And that could be twice as long that it lasts.
Yeah, I mean, you can, I think they'll last. You'll get a lot more life out of the material, meaning you won't be getting the fading, the chalking, that sort of thing. I mean, I've seen buildings that haven't been painted in 30 years that look pretty decent, and I have to think
A long time. Yeah.
that's because the older materials had a lot more solids and better solids and probably some stuff that really shouldn't be in there that's lasting them a long time.
Yeah. Got it. And is there anything else on the horizon of new changes coming down the pipe that you're expecting? Or I know
Oh, I
in
hope not,
California.
because I feel like we just got it together. figuring
Yeah.
out figuring out all the new materials that are coming out. So yeah, I mean, not off the top of my head. I don't know anything that would be coming out that's new. Like I said, we're constantly in the field learning the products that are coming out, and every time California changes something or mandates something, and the manufacturers have to change their product, we're having to learn to reapply the product and make it look good. So I'm hoping things get better and material gets better with time.
Yeah. What did I miss? That's all I got that I could think of like in my experience and like seeing projects and doing repaints and like issues that I've dealt with in the past. Anything else you can think of that are good to knows for people that are owning buildings or renting buildings or things to keep in mind?
Well, yeah, if you're owning a building, I mean, things to keep in mind if you're gonna go out and look for somebody to do the work. I've really seen some horrendous stuff being done. So make sure you're just doing your due diligence, especially if you're going out to you're a owner of maybe one or two or three buildings, and you're not some big developer. Just make sure you're doing your due diligence. Ask for, easy stuff is to check someone's contractor's license. That's an easy one. Check their GL and work comp and ask for a couple references. Maybe go look at a couple of the buildings that work they've done. It's something they should be doing so they don't run into a problem down the road where someone's not finishing a job or they're not really getting what they were expecting, that sort of thing. So just make sure you do your due diligence.
What could go wrong? And there's people actually not finishing jobs?
Tons of things. I feel like the painting industry especially is there's a wide array of people in the industry, meaning someone could just be a single guy working out of the back of his van, all the way to you have these national companies that are doing work all around the states. So yeah, there's a wide variety of people to choose from. So just make sure you do a little due diligence before you have someone come out and give you estimates.
Yeah, I love looking at jobs they've done in the past before, right? That's especially in this game where like the results over time, like you can have a variety of different outcomes,
Yeah.
and whether they did it like last month or last year, like you'll be able to start to see how it's how it's lasting.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, thank you, Neal. That's all I got. I think that helps people think through. And boy, do we hope that there's more ground up construction in 25 and 26 as we kind of hit the bottom and start going back up again. It seems like
Yeah,
we
for
have the
sure.
potential to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like it's going to be strong. I'm already seeing developers testing the waters with numbers on projects. So